the introduction or not.
You know, it was not on record that you're an expert, but I'm saying it
Oh, good.
again. We've got two wonderful experts with us today. Thank you. So
Uh,
I'm going to turn it over to Alexis to get us started.
Okay, hi everyone. So my name is Alexis Lawton. I am the new Assistant Director of Programming for the SCML Educator Network. We are so glad to have you here for our Fundamentals of Access Testing panelist event. So this is actually our second year hosting this, and we hope this answers some questions to help make you more confident as a test administrator or as a school testing coordinator if you are an administrator. So today we will be asking questions that are group based on before, during, and after the access testing. So we would like to welcome and thank Dr. Jerica and Jonathan White for agreeing to be panelists today. We appreciate your willingness to answer questions and share your expertise. So if you are new to SCMLE, we would love to stay connected with you. We are a nonprofit that supports educators that work with multilingual learners, whether that is a ML teacher, content area teacher, or other staff around the building, or you're an administrator. We are here to serve you. So we have a private Facebook group for just South Carolina teachers, but everyone is welcome on the public page, as well as our other social media platforms. And we do recommend you joining our mailing list. It's a great way to stay connected and make sure you don't miss out on any of the events. We only send out a letter once a month and only a reminder whenever there is an event. So we do not spam you with multiple things. Anyone is welcome to sign up for the newsletter. Okay. We have two events coming up soon. So in a couple weeks, we have a secondary newcomers 101 presentation. So this information that should help high school ML teachers and content teachers with ML students. Our general newcomers presentation last year was a huge hit, and we hope that this one is just as impactful. Our presenters will cover topics like working with SLIFE students, collaborating with content teachers, helping with high school ML students, navigating their unique challenges on various fronts, as well as some effective instructional strategies. So we would love to have you join us, and please share with others. And we also have a huge silent auction and in-person event coming up. So the silent auction begins on January 18th, and there are some incredible things to bid on. We will be using GiveButter as the platform, and more information will be shared soon. We also have an in-person event on February 1st in Charleston at Estuary Beans and Barley. So we would love to have you attend. There will be additional raffle items there, as well as ways to continue bidding on the silent auction, and it ends at 5 p.m. and it coincides with the end of the event. We would love for you to share with anyone willing to support, and we truly have some incredible items to bid on, so make sure you check it out. So finally, before we get started, there is some housekeeping. So we ask that you keep your microphones off, but we absolutely encourage you to add your experiences or tips to the chat box, in addition to any follow-up questions that you may have. We do like to reward you for your time. So attendees today will all receive a professional development certificate. So it's going to be emailed to you within a week by various members of our team. If you haven't gotten it within a week, check your spam folder and then you can email me and we will get it to you. So my email will be listed at the end of the presentation today. And finally, we do have a feedback form. So we truly value and use your feedback because we are a nonprofit. We are here to serve you. So your feedback is important to us. The link will be in the chat and we'll share it again at the end of the presentation. So now let's get into it. So like I said, we will go through various sections before, during, and after access testing. So here is the first question. What do you recommend teachers do to prepare their students for the access tests? And with the new exit criteria, how do you recommend we continue to motivate students to do their best work?
So John and I kind of just planned it where I'm going to take kind of the odd questions and he'll take the even questions. So I'm going to start and he's going to add to it as he sees fit. So when I prepare for access tests for the kids, WIDA has some great tools to use. I mean, they have sample items that you can use for practice. There's even if you go into the students' Chromebooks and go to the app, but have them sign out of their Chromebook and you click on app and go to DRC Insight like you're going to give a WIDA screener or something. You can go and do to the test prep and there's videos on the universal tools and how to sign in. And those are great things for your kids that are new to the online part of it. Like your first graders might need to see that and things like that. And it's good for you to kind of look at too. So that's very helpful for like the practical aspect of it. To help my kids prepare mentally for it, I just kind of start talking about it and then we start working on similar questions. Like today I had some of my students go through and we talked about listening and keywords and what they need to focus on as they're answering questions. So I do recommend that you look at those sample questions that WIDA give. That kind of gives you an idea and you can do kind of similar things. I have some other materials that was purchased through a district that I use that Continental has made and things like that. But I just find it best just to give them practice questions. And then with the new exit criteria, I think it didn't change anything really. We still want to motivate them. A lot of my peers do goal sheets, which I'm gonna take their ideas and do it next year where they set they they go over their access scores from the previous year and they set a goal or a reasonable goal. And I think that just gives some kids tangible motivation to do well on the access tests. And then several of our schools are taking it more seriously now, thank goodness. And one school's even gonna have the principal come in and do like a pep talk with them and stuff because we're not very high numbers ML wise, but we're growing. So that's something cool. So the goal sheets would be great for motivation in my opinion. John, you want
Yeah.
to add anything?
Yeah, no, I do. I just think that speaks to the way that I look at this question is just that, you know, there's two parts to it. And one is everything we do is preparation for access from day one. And even from the day they finish the test, you're gonna start working on their acquiring language, and access is a test of where they are with language that they're constantly acquiring. And those conversations that you have should be things that happen all the time, should be things that happen with, from the first day of school. But then so the other part of that is like preparing them now in the next few weeks to be ready for access. And I think that Jenica hit on that. There's all of the great resources from WIDA. And then wherever your district may get resources from, there are other resources out there. The different curricula tend to have something that sort of looks like what access tests, and so I recommend kind of diving into some of those things. In our district, we have a group of teachers who are working on trying to create uh, uh, assessments that look like WIDA and so we're not a Google district. A lot of districts are Google districts, and maybe you can do that in Google Classroom. Our district uses Schoology, so we have teachers who are trying to do that kind of thing, create mock speaking tests in Schoology. But that kind of stuff is stuff that, again, is year long. Um, but I think in talking to, and I've talked to a couple of teachers to sort of help me get prepared for this. And what really stands out to me is just remind students that that those kids who are ready to exit, they can exit and have the conversation that it's not an impossible task. That if they do their best, that they can do it, and then try and make that really tangible what they need to do to be able to exit. Um, and then just remember that, a lot of these students, after they've taken this test twice, they're the experts at the test. They know this test. and lean into their expertise and ask them what they need to do better and what they remember about the test as best as you can. And then with newcomers who aren't going to be able to answer questions like, what was it like last time you took it, or you know, set really, really specific goals about the test, just remember that like it's, you know, this is something that should be low pressure for them, and make sure that they don't feel too much pressure. I think that's one of the best ways to prepare your newcomers for this. But I will say, I do, before I get started, since I get to answer the next question too, and I feel, Jenica, if you're good, I feel like we're good to go on to the next question. I
Yeah.
did ask 3 teachers to help me with this because I haven't given online access. Actually, I've never administered online access to a large group of students before. So I asked some teachers in my district, and I just want to shout them out. One of them's on here, Brian Lineup, but Tiffany Potter and Juan Hernandez are 2 teachers that also helped me answer some of these questions. So if we're good to go to the next question, I can jump in to defining the differences.
Yes, so define the difference in the roles for planning and executing access testing of the school testing coordinator, STC, and the test administrator, ML teacher.
Yeah, so there is a great resource that I recommend that everybody look at on the WIDA website that is on the state-specific guidance page, and it is called the Access for ELL's online checklist, and it outlines the difference between not only these 2 roles, STC and the test administrator, but also what the district person is supposed to do. And this, I find, is something that I come back to all the time because I get teachers asking me, how do I do this? How do I do that? How do I do these things? And those things, you go to this resource and you can say, this is not your thing. This is a test coordinator thing. And it's pretty complicated. The difference between those roles, there's lots of stuff that school testing coordinators are supposed to do. So for me, the number one difference is the test administrator does not do as much as the test coordinator does. And I mean, I'll say as a warning too, that this is the first place where you can see that WIDA access as a federal test, as a state test, is a school-wide test. And it is meant to represent everyone in the school, the way the whole school works. And this is one of those places where it is not the ESOL teacher's responsibility to do all that happens with these students. And so I think that the differences in these roles is pretty well set by the state. And I would just say that my advice for a test administrator is to know your place and don't let people try to pressure you to do too much. Jenica mentioned that's too, that we're getting better and better at administering WIDA access. And this is one of those things. I mean, I think schools leave points on the report card, points on the table when they don't do a good job administering WIDA access. A lot of ESOL teachers, MLP specialists feel pressure that I don't think they should have to feel when it comes to this test. This is something that you should just, that's a minor responsibility. Just help your students get through this test. But a lot of that is on these school testing coordinators, these administrators, to do that work. I hope that answers that question well. I really think that the document is the best way to understand the difference. Jenica, how do you think of the difference between these 2?
Well, I think of the STC as handling kind of all the behind the scenes work. They're the ones that's really responsible for getting the materials organized, making sure the test tickets are ready to go with the accommodations and everything. The TA handles scheduling, making sure that the kids are getting the right test, that the right person's taking the right test. More of the hands-on person.
Yeah, and especially in the moment, right? Like I'm making sure I'm
Mhm.
giving you this correct test, that a testing coordinator didn't make a mistake, didn't give me the wrong.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so cooperation is key. You really need to, work with the school testing coordinator. Today, I don't have my town yet, and we're missing towns. And so I messaged him. I was like, hey, we need to be on this because we're testing soon. So you know, it's just having that good communication, cooperation with each other. But the school testing coordinator is the one that does the first leg work. You do the back leg work, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's also important to remember that the school testing coordinator takes responsibility for security though. And so on a day-to-day basis, that school testing coordinator is going to be the one who's responsible for um, the overall organization of the way the test is administered. So a test administrator may be responsible for a lot, you know, once that door closes, once kids are in there and sitting down, but getting kids into the room, um, getting material ready to give to administer that test, a lot of that is still on the testing coordinator on a day-to-day basis.
So, what are your tips for communicating and collaborating with teachers as we prepare for and administer the access test?
So my number one tip is to be in communication with them. Don't wait a day before and say, "Hey, I've got to take this kid out of your class," because then you're going to probably get some upset people. So what I try to do is I've already made my schedule. It's ready to go. We're starting the when the window opens the 21st. And so I'll probably send out a week before an email saying, "Hey, I need to pull such and such. It's during this time. And I realize it's going to be from your class time, but I'll get them back as soon as possible." Just letting them know the schedule ahead of time, locations, and, you know, letting them know that I think they forget that the access test is just as important as SC ready, because they all have this mentality of SC ready is such a big test. Well, for us, the access test is a big and important test too. And I think some of them forget that. And a lot of that comes from administration down, but you know, just cooperation, again, communication. So that's what I do. Share with email. I share my schedule with my school test coordinator, really utilizing your school test coordinator to help you.
Yep.
To
Yeah, I think a lot of this is something, this is where as a test administrator, as an MLP specialist, collaborating with the school testing coordinator is key. And Jenica mentioned that, you know, what comes from administration, the messages that come from administration. But I would say this goes back to the way I answer the first question too, that the communication, yes, there's immediate communication that you're going to be doing. I'm pulling people tomorrow, and I'm pulling kids in a couple of weeks. This is when they're going to take this test. All of that is critical. You have to keep classroom teachers in the loop when this is happening. But big picture, they should know this from day one. They should know that this test is an important test. I mean, there are students, the reason that this is a part of accountability for the whole school, the reason that this is a part of report cards is a good thing for us, right? There are students who will not pass SC ready. They will not meet on SC ready. They will not pass an EOC. That's the definition of many of our MLs. But we can pivot our attention to WIDA access, and those classroom teachers, this is one of the things that I remind classroom teachers early on and often, that WIDA access is not a test of English. WIDA access is a test of a student's ability to participate in content classrooms. And the test itself, and they should know this, I think that we should make sure that this is something that you tell content teachers early and often, that it is a test that mirrors their classroom. And if the students are in their classroom and have equal access to their classroom, then they're going to do well on WIDA access. And so if you have any anxiety about students who aren't going to meet on SC ready, who aren't going to pass an EOC, those teachers need to understand early and often that the take that anxiety away, put it on a reasonable test with reasonable goals on WIDA access. The growth measurements for most students are pretty reasonable goals. And so then when you get to this point in the year, you want teachers to recognize this is a big deal, right? Ideal scenario is, and I had a teacher tell me, like, they have a biology teacher who's developed mock access questions for students right? That's what you want to see, is these teachers being able to say, yeah, I teach an EOC. The student's not going to pass an EOC, but at the end of the year, I can take responsibility for whether this student met on WIDA Access because I know that they're acquiring English in my classroom. And so then the conversations that you have now about when they're taking access, you want to see content teachers more and more invested in when that's going to be, and you want to use them to motivate students to be able to say, oh, you're getting ready to be pulled at 9 o'clock or at 10 o'clock to go do this test. And when you want them to leave that classroom knowing that teacher is invested in them doing a good job on the test as well.
When it comes to scheduling, what are the rules on scheduling based on grade levels or tiers? Like, are there any tips for scheduling in elementary, middle, and high school? And how do you make access work with the student's general schedule in other classes?
So I'm not sure. I don't know if this is controversial or not. I think I've run into, as over the years of trying to advise lots of different schools, lots of different administrators, test coordinators, and ESOL teachers on how to give this test. A lot of folks have different opinions about what it's supposed to look like. I have seen, and so one of the things that causes me to sort of step back and say, ground rule is do not put access in the ESOL period, right? Do not say, okay, I'm in high school. I get my ESOL 1 students on, first period. This is when I'm going to give the test, and then I'm going to give it during my fourth period when I get my ESOL 3 students or whatever. This test needs to be treated like a state test, and the school needs to shut down as much as possible. If you need to change classrooms so that you're in a place that's not high traffic, you need to change classrooms. But you also need to consider that you put this test at the time of day when students are best prepared to take this test. And you consider that you're not interfering with, I mean, and elementary teachers I talk to, that you're not taking kids out of the PE class that they're looking forward to being in, or you're not overlapping with their recess. But at the same time, you are saying, I'm going to give access at the beginning of the day, regardless of when these students are supposed to be, where these students are supposed to be. And again, a lot of that is on the school testing coordinator to make sure that that happens. But that's one of the pieces with scheduling and where we can do better to make sure the students are taking this test seriously. And that's my number one scheduling tip, is to be very careful about when you give this test. Shut down to give this test. And then I would say, um, I think, and I checked with people, I feel like if you're frustrated by a statement where I say, I think you can, wherever you are, you should probably be able to get most of your access testing done in 2 to 3 weeks if you condense everything and you get it done. And so that's my scheduling tip, is to figure out the best way to say, I know that I've got hour-long blocks where, the listening and reading are an hour. It used to be that we would give listening and reading on the same day. And most teachers I talk to now, they say, give listening one day, give reading the next day, give writing the next day, but you get 3 groups in one day, or as, however you can. And you don't stick to your normal schedule. You change the schedule so that you can get access taken care of. And then, so, I mean, other than that, like general tips for this, the answers about scheduling based on grade levels and tiers, I mean, all of that stuff is within the training. You do the training, there's very specific rules. I find that it's actually pretty flexible. Most of these tests, I think listening and reading, you can give to all grade levels at once if you need to, but most people I talk to are trying to test as small groups as possible. Just because it's easier to be attentive to the needs of students, especially at the elementary level. I have one teacher who tests in groups of 3 or 4. I have other teachers who try to test in groups of 7 or 8. But then our groups aren't that large either. And oftentimes it's really hard to mix grade levels anyway. It's a little bit different in middle and high. Jenica, what do you see?
Well, I want to
I'll
give
turn this over to you.
I want to give a resource. I can't share it because I had to download it because it came from WIDA when you log into the WIDA Secure portal. It's called the 2024-2025 Test Administrator Essentials Access for ELLs. So it's a resource that I found within WIDA once I was logged in. It gives you every detail you could ever want about grade level tiers, when you can, scheduling for kindergarten, everything. So that was a good little thing that I found. So if you log into your WIDA portal and kind of look at your resources stuff under training resources, you can find it. So specifically, just to answer the question about tiers and stuff, with reading and listening, you can test in the clusters. Grade 1 can be together, grade 2, 3, grade 4, 4 through 12, because they're all one. Kindergarten is individualized testing. And then after the reading and listening, you or your STC, however they have it set up, you have to run that tier report for grades 1 through 3 to see which booklet they're going to get for writing. That's the most important thing for that part, so that you're given the correct tier based off of their listening and reading scores.
And then
And
they
so-
have to be tested in the same tier groups.
Yes. So then in the writing, you have to make sure that you have all your tier A's, same grade level cluster. So you would do grade 2, 3 tier A's together, grade 2, 3 BC's together. You can't do A's and B's and C's all at the same time.
Right.
So that's something that they say. And then don't put stickers on booklets right when you get them. You gotta wait for those the tier reports. And then I suggest if possible, if you can, do speaking one-on-one because they're embarrassed and they, especially the newcomers. And so I have found that I get way better results when I can schedule kids one-on-one to do their speaking. And with your newcomers, it's not going to take as long as they tell you it takes, because they don't have to speak as much. And then for working with the students' general schedule and other classes. So I liked everything that John said. Some of my teachers can't do that though, because they have class periods and they're not going to get coverage for that. So they have to test. So my high school teachers, they have got to test whatever kids they have in block 1 in that block 1, and they have to test whatever kids they have block 2 in block 2. But they are changing locations to the testing hallway, and they are, taking it serious that way. And of course, she's got to move around some things and get coverage for other classes. It just depends on what kind of setup you have and how many schools you have. I have 2 schools that I do, so I'm testing. I test on the days that I'm actually there. So I test Mondays and Fridays at my elementary school and Tuesdays and Thursdays at my middle school. And I try not to pull them from the same class more than once if possible, because I don't want them missing English 2 times in the week, So I try to really look at their schedules and look at that and do the best that I can. And then, general education teachers will want to tell you no, but you need to tell them that it's important. You have a schedule and you have kids to test.
Yeah, I think that's you see the difference between the way we're thinking about it too, and it's definitely hard to do, right? Like I would say just get it over with, pull them first thing in the morning, do what you need to do. But then I hear the same thing too, and so I guess what I would say is don't feel like you're doing the wrong thing. Just feel like, you have to make sure you're doing what matches what the students need.
And
And that's the other thing.
you.
The
It has to work for your school.
Yeah.
It has to work for, a lot of people are limited in what they can do depending on, what their administration tells them to do.
Yeah.
But I mean, the big tip is try to do the speaking in as small a group as possible. That's the biggest tip I can say. And then I don't try to pull my kids out of the electives that they love, because then they're not going to do their best on the test because they know, I'm missing recess.
Yeah.
So
the other thing I would say too that I get from talking to teachers is, and just don't keep in mind too, that everything what's best for the student is really the best thing to do in this instance. And there are sometimes there are students, oftentimes there are students who don't need to be tested together, or students who maybe need one-on-one testing. Keep in mind that all of those things, whatever's best for the student and the mentality of the student in that moment is going to be the best thing for giving this test and the best thing for scheduling this test.
So where can we find my students' IEP accommodations for access, and how or where do STCs input access accommodations into DRC Insight?
So you get the IEP accommodations for access from your special education teacher. They're the ones that should have notified you about it anyways. Our district used to have Enrich, and we could log in and see what their
Yeah.
you know, what it was, but now we've switched over to the new thing, and it's very complicated. And so just reach out to the special education teacher if you know that they have an IEP. And you know, I found that a lot of the stuff on their IEPs are messed up for access testing, because most of your MLs, even that have IEPs, won't need some kind of accommodation unless it's like extended speaking time. A lot of them get that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not very common, except for the extended speaking time. I see that a lot, but it has to be specifically listed, you know, in their IEP. It'll say access for ELLs, and then it'll have the specific name of the accommodation that they require on the test, because they're not going to get like a bilingual dictionary or anything for this test. It's not classroom accommodations. It's specifically for access tests. There's only specific ones you can use. So make sure that you look at those IEPs. STCs, they log into DRC Insight. They have different rights from a ML teacher. Like when I went in and looked beside my STC when they were logged in, they can do a lot more things and add accommodations and take away accommodations. So they actually go into that program and put it in there before they print out test tickets. So that's where they do it.
Yeah. And I think that one of the big points that I would make with this is school testing coordinators. This is a huge part of where this is their responsibility. They should be able to take care of most of this work. And this is where it overlaps with all the other tests that they give. The SC Ready looks the same way. They're getting IEP information from special education. They're entering it into DRC. They get trained on this. This is a serious thing. So even if you work in a school where your administration does not fully understand that ESOL students, if you have a subgroup, are way more valuable than a student taking SC Ready or a student taking an EOC, they still haven't gotten this mystery message out there and they're not taking access as seriously. At least you know that they know this question, and how you organize test materials. These things are things your school testing coordinators do all the time, and they should be good at. And you should be able to rely on them to know how to make sure this stuff happens. I think Jenica's point about accommodations is really worth driving home. There aren't that many accommodations that students are going to get here. Maybe you've got students who are handwriting. Maybe you've got students. I mean, the one that is the most common and I think is the most useful on this test is control of the audio for kids who need to be able to like focus on listening questions and speaking questions, and then need to have to be able to hear it one more time. It's a huge part of students who maybe their attention is not where everybody else's is, and they have the ability to listen twice to things. That's the one that, I mean, but other than that, what else, there's not a lot that you run into that shouldn't be driven by the IEP. And the last thing I'll say is, and we're a part of the IEP team every time.
Yes,
Every time there's an IEP meeting, you should be on that meeting. And so don't leave an IEP meeting without making sure that we've talked about WIDA access
right.
and the designation of that student as an ML. That's why we're there in that meeting.
Where should we keep access testing materials?
Wherever your school testing coordinator tells you to keep
Yeah.
those things. They're responsible for security. Just don't be dumb with it. I think locked rooms, locked cabinets when you're walking out for a minute and you need to go somewhere. But by and large, school testing coordinators should be really strict about having rules for where they want things to be at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, whenever you're moving materials in and out of. But the short answer, in my experience, is a vault,
Yeah.
the school vault. How does that sound
It,
to you, Jenica?
it sounds good to me. Like, it's your school testing coordinator should keep it double locked, I think is what we were told one time. Locked in a filing cabinet, locked in a door. And so just remember, like he said, when you leave your room to go use the bathroom or whatever, that your door, at least your door's locked with the testing materials, because it's considered secure. So I just, at one of my schools, it's in my school testing coordinator's office in a filing cabinet, and they show me where they hid the key in case I ever need it and they're not there. And
Yeah.
then, at another school, they have actually a testing location room that they use for SC Ready. And it's also in a filing cabinet. And again, they told me where the key was in case they're not there and I need to access materials. So it just depends on what school you're at.
As many locks as possible are good.
Yeah. Okay.
What are tips for organizing testing materials?
Well, I already mentioned it.
Yeah.
Don't put stickers on writing booklets until you got 2 reports. I think
Somebody's going to do that, though.
Yeah,
Every
nothing
year,
ever bad
somebody
has
asks
happened.
me,
I've
what do I
heard
do?
stories in the past of where they went and put stickers on all the test booklets before they were started, and I can't imagine that catastrophe. But do that. As far as organizing tests, I mean, your STC is gonna keep them, and then they put mine in file folders, so I can have all my kids there, and I keep them paper clipped together, because most of yours will be just a a ticket. So if it's 4 through 12, that's all it's going to be. You really don't, unless you have like a alternate access or special materials or something. So yeah, I just keep my tickets, and then we'll get later on into this, but I check off on the tickets after a student finishes. I'll explain more about that as we go to that question. It's more like that. But there's not too many materials that you have to manage other than the booklets. Like I wouldn't get all the materials. If you're testing for listening, you don't need the writing booklets. So let that stay in the STC coordinators area. You just need to pick up listening test tickets. If you're testing a kindergartner, take the big box with you to your room, and then when you're done with that kindergartner, take that box back to the testing coordinator area. So, you don't have to manage that many materials.
Yeah, I think it also is that other question that we looked at. School testing coordinators, this should be their bread and butter. They should get lots of training on this. They should put a lot of thought into this. So the warning that I give here is, it's like, I remember many years ago when I was responsible for administering WIDA access, and and it was just me making stuff up because no one told me about how to make things really secure. But then we would come around in the high school I was in, we'd come around to graduation tests, and everything had bins, and you signed it all out at the beginning of the day, and teachers lined up to get their bin, and they counted their books, and they said, I've got all of my books. And there was this really rigorous practice in place to make sure everything was secure. And through my career, I've experienced that. We'd access nothing there. Then you go do the state testing, and it's this crazy rigorous thing. Access should be that same crazy rigorous process. Whatever your school testing coordinator is trained to do, they need to do what they do for Ready, what they do for EOC, they do for this process. And just don't, that goes back to the first warning from the first question, is don't let someone pressure you into doing something that's not your responsibility or that's not right. And this is one of those things where it should just be, they know what to do to keep this stuff organized and carefully checked in, checked out, and secure. And they have lots of good systems. There's all kinds of systems with like 2 envelopes, and I put a ticket in the envelope. I take it out of the envelope when the kid is finished with the test, and I put it in the other envelope. Or, I mean, There's lots of little things like that. And there's not a whole lot. You're right. There's not a lot of testing material. I don't know. How do you feel about the writing booklets though, Jenica? Because you test elementary students. I mean, do you find that the writing booklets that you're like, you have a testing coordinator who's like, look, these are the 5 booklets you're checking out, these tier BC second grade tests, and you sign that you checked out 5 tier BC tests that were all labeled correctly, and then you give the test and you bring it back. Is that the system that you work under?
Not the system I work under, but at other
Yeah.
schools, yes, where
Okay.
they I talked to one school test coordinator who's gonna put stickers on for her, yeah, for her ML teachers. And I was like, wait, you know you do it when? And she was like, yeah, I know that. I was like, okay. I was like, okay, that's good. I was like, you can do that. And so that'll be more helpful, I think, for those teachers, especially because there's 2 new ones that are kind of on their own doing it. Because they'll see the names to give and they'll know that it's the right tier. But when you have a school testing coordinator that knows that you know what you're doing, you kind of have all the booklets. And so if you have kind of a hands-off school testing coordinator, if I'm testing grade 2, I just get, after I check my tier report, I just get just the booklets I need and I leave the rest in the school testing coordinator locked area. So if I check in, I have 3 that need tier A and 1 that needs BC, then I'll get 3 A books in the BC, and there might be 2 other BC books left, but I leave them there just because I'm not going to take more than I need because I know who I'm testing on my schedule.
So this question is for during access testing. What are some suggestions to ensure each student is completing their correct assessment or booklet?
Oh yeah, so this was a 1 and now it's a 2, so it's an even one. This is yeah, this is, believe it or not, this is a real issue, right? So students will and it may happen. I would say, first of all, don't panic if you make a mistake. There are ways to go back and correct your mistake, but for sure when it comes to completing the correct test, those test tickets, having a system where the student's test ticket is on their desk. You've administered, you've given out the test tickets. You make sure, you have to be very careful that the name on the test ticket is the name for the student. There are times where, a test will kick you out and you have to log back in. And so the one thing I would say that I've heard again and again is just be careful that you don't take up test tickets. Be careful with students who have the same last name, students where they might have the same first name and you're like, oh, I got Jonathan's test ticket right here, and it's really the other Jonathan's test ticket. So whatever kind of system you can create where the test ticket is on their desk until they're really getting into the test, you can take it up. What else do I got for that? Jenica, what do you have for these? I think just slowing down and being really careful with this process.
So I use the rosters because your school test coordinator should give you the roster, which I guess mine used it as a sign out sheet one time. And I use that as a checklist to make sure that they're done. But the best thing that I found that works for me is after I check all the names and stuff, because that's very important. And when they're finished with their test, that's when I take their test ticket up because I know that, hey, you're finished, we're done. And so I take a pen and I put a big check mark on that test ticket. And I know that that test ticket has been used and it won't need to be used again. So that's a reminder to me that, okay, this person has had reading and this person has had listening. So if a check mark's missing, I know that this test has not been completed. And then on my schedule, I use Google Docs. I use the strike through shortcut. So as soon as a student is finished with testing, I do a strike through their name to know I've already tested this kid. And so, and if a student is missing, I highlight the kid's name on my schedule. So I would cross out and highlight on your whatever schedule you have with their name. Because that just helps me keep organized to know who's tested and who has not.
Yeah, I think this question there's really kind of a two-part to this question, right? That they're completing the assessment and that they're completing the correct assessment. So
Right.
I think just be careful and know that it is possible that students can start on the wrong test, the wrong assessment. You have to be careful of that. And then the completing thing is I think that's good advice for that. There's some more questions at the end about after testing and making sure that everybody has completed. But this is a good place to say that you know, especially online, students, if they close out without having seen that they have finished and submitted their test, there's a chance that you're going to have to go back and get them to log back in and submit their test. So you want to make sure even beforehand that you say, like, you do not close out. I need to see that you've completed this test. And be a stickler for it, right? If you get over there and they're like, yeah, I closed my here, I'm done, and they give you everything, you say like, nope, open it back up, log back in. I need to see that screen because there's lots of stories of people getting burned and going back to a test coordinator saying they didn't complete the reading test, and you know that student swore that they completed the reading test and they just hadn't submitted it, and you have to go back and get them to open it up and try again. I hear those stories. So again, I think, but slowing down, being careful, making sure that you see that every student has completed it,
Checking
and that their
names.
name matches
Mhm.
their test
Yes.
or their test ticket.
What are some tips for administering the ALT access test or the access test to a student in a special settings, like a self-contained class, when a ML teacher may not feel confident in doing so?
John's question, but I'm going to answer because
Yeah, go ahead.
I have to do that. So I I try to bring a test monitor in there with me, and I think you're supposed to anyways. But so I get
Mhm.
an aide that they're familiar with to go to my room with me or wherever you're testing. And all they do is sit there. They don't communicate or do anything like that. But it makes the student feel more comfortable, especially if you have not seen that student very much. So that's what I like to do because the aide has a relationship with the student, and then let them take breaks, um, and familiarize yourself with how the test works and all the materials and stuff before you get in there with the alt test, because it's a little different, with the way that you do the reminders and the how you say stuff and you repeat
Mhm.
stuff a lot. So I would definitely be familiar with how the test works. The WIDA training video is the best for that because it's what they tell you in that video was great, because I was like, this is a great little overview of how you do the
Yeah.
alt test.
A lot of folks I talk to, I mean, this is a collaborative effort with that special services teacher. And special services teacher, all certified teachers can administer WIDA access. So it doesn't have to be an ESOL teacher. There's no training in linguistics that you have to administer WIDA access. And you can, and I see this a lot where the special services teacher, the self-contained classroom teacher, goes through the training, ESOL teacher, self-contained teacher, they work together. So you mentioned needing to have a monitor in there. That you can be that monitor. And I mean, it's just a matter of having a comfortable person administer the test. A lot of people I work with, they get the special services teacher on board to help administer that test, whether the ESOL teacher is the monitor and the special services teacher is the administrator, or vice versa. I think that's right. Making sure the student is comfortable is the best thing.
So the next two questions are focusing on after access testing. So this one is remind teachers of the basic procedures for turning in materials. So which materials should they be keeping to return, even though districts will also share this information?
Mhm. Yeah, so this one's funny because every year there's always some piece of garbage that I feel like I'm looking at and I'm like, I don't know if this should go back to WIDA, but guess what? WIDA gets it, and I put it in the bag and send it back to WIDA. And like, don't stress about the stuff that you send to WIDA, because to me, they're a faceless organization and I don't know, I don't really care what the person opening the bag up um, thinks about the things that I accidentally sent to them. But we will tell you that there's stuff that's secure. Secure stuff has to go back to them. There's stuff that needs to be shredded, and then there's stuff that can just be thrown away. And all of that stuff, there's pretty tight guidance for that. I mean, it's really obvious for the most part. Test booklets have to go back and are secure materials.
Usually it's stuff with a barcode, isn't it?
Yeah.
It has a barcode on it. That's what goes back. And your school test coordinator should kind of have an idea of what that is, you know?
It's written in multiple places. I do find
Mhm.
that it's confusing though. Every year there are schools that call me and ask me to help them pack up because they're nervous about what to send back. And you just have to find it where it's documented the right things to send back. It's really not as hard as it seems. I understand maybe being nervous about it, but it should be pretty well documented, even within that box that you open up that is the last box with the plastic bags that you wrap everything in, and there's instructions and your stickers to go on the box and all. Just follow the instructions.
Okay. The kindergarten test is getting a facelift for next school year. Is it too early for you to have heard anything on what this may look like?
I've never heard nothing. I don't know anything about what it looks like, but also I'm not one of the people that I don't administer kindergarten access either. So
I
if you
put
quiz me
a
on what it actually looks like, I
I
wouldn't
put a
tell you.
link in the chat about how they're revising access. I don't know anything specifically about kindergarten, but I think they're revamping a lot of access, not just kindergarten. They're revising questions and things, and there's going to be some field test stuff embedded in this test. So that website that I put in the chat will lead you to WIDA's information about what's coming in 25-26. That's all I know.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, once again, thank you so much, Dr. Heron and Jonathan, for coming and answering questions. We really appreciate it. Everyone, please make sure to fill out our feedback form. And as a reminder, certificates will be mailed out to you within the next week. If you haven't received it, just check your spam folder, but then you can email me at alexis@scmle.org. I don't know if there are any questions in the chat because I can't look at the chat, but as
I
all
don't see any, but if anybody wants to add any to, I mean, I don't.
And Alexis, I'm not sure if you need to hop off. I'm here if you want me to kind of moderate the inter. Actually, April was planning to do it. April, are you here?
I'm here. Yes, ma'am.
All right,
Ready
you want to
whenever
take
y'all are.
over? Yeah, so sorry, Alexis, I know you have to run. But April, I think, has the presentation as well. You should be able to share.
I
April,
do.
right?
Just give me one moment and I'll end us out. Got to share it with you guys.
Is it still recording?
It
It's still
should be.
recording.
Okay.
All right.
There's a question about the link to the feedback form. April, is that something that you have? Oh, there it is on the slide. I'll type it in
Yes, ma'am.
so people can.
Just trying to get us to presenter view. Give me 1 second. Sorry, guys. There it is. And you said there was a question about what?
About the feedback form. But if
Oh,
we
okay.
want to follow up on any of the questions that were asked, I'm not sure if we got to all of the questions, but we can hang on here for another couple minutes.
It looks like Dana is asking if the recording will be shared, and I can confidently say I'm pretty sure this recording is going to be on a website for
It will be. It'll
forever.
be shared in the,
Yeah.
Like you
in the next
Yeah.
look up the
day.
one from last year.
That's right. So it will
Yeah.
be shared.
So did we answer that question about the feedback form?
Yes, I
I
put the
can't see
link
it.
in the chat. Mhm.
Okay. All right. So does anybody have any other questions before we end today? Can pop them in the
I will
chat or whatever.
ask Jonathan and Jenica if you guys feel like you're able to tackle everything that you had hoped to, if there was anything that came up for you that you wanted to just comment on before we end here. Final thoughts.
Just
I'll let Jenica go first.
don't stress. Just take it one test at a time, because in the end, your kids are going to do the best they can, and you'll just keep on teaching.
That's
So,
right.
Well, and that there's a question that we originally thought we might answer about getting back to your caseload and how do you do that, or managing your caseload while doing the test.
Uh-huh.
And I think that speaks to, do what you got to do to get through access and get back to your caseload. And remember that getting back to the caseload is the important thing. Hopefully you can, you know, reconfigure your schedule so that you can get through access. There's always going to be loose ends that you're tying up here and there. Students who are absent, you know, I hear people say it's a really stressful time, and you feel like you're testing for a month on end. But try to just take it one step at a time. Try to be really organized at the beginning so that you can get as much done as possible and get back to the really important stuff. And the other thing I'd say is don't, and maybe Katie just like, it's like putting this across the plate for me to say, but like, don't take responsibility for access. It is not just the ESOL teacher's responsibility. The results of access are not just the results on ESOL teachers or MLP specialists. This is something that you want to step back from. I gave this test because someone told me how to give this test. There's a testing coordinator who's responsible for this test. I did my part for this. And this represents the way the whole school works with these students. And if the whole school is not invested in this test, the one thing we can take responsibility for is just to keep saying it as loud as possible. Like, this is a test of everybody and how they impact the experiences of these students. And try not to feel, bad or stressed about this test, especially if there's other people in your building who are not, because it should be something that everybody shares.
Yes, that is right, Jonathan. Thank you for saying that. Our access results are a result of the whole building's work and how they work with multilingual students and all of that. But if there's nothing else, I'm gonna end us up if that's okay. Just remember you have this bit.ly link here for the fundamentals feedback. We will be emailing your certificates by the end of next week. It may be a different email because we kind of do it as a team. So if you don't receive yours or you have questions, just email Alexis at slme.org. And we would love for you to stay connected with us. We have a I believe is it online, Katie, our auction that's coming up on the 25th,
Yeah.
as well as in person.
That's right. And we were able to give some of that info at the beginning, but starting
Oh, okay.
next Saturday, we'll have an online silent auction, and it will run until February 1st. And we'll have a culminating event on February 1st on John's Island.
Perfect.
Yep.
And
so we have something for everybody.
perfect. And then just let's stay connected. We've got all bit.ly links, website, Twitter, X, Facebook, Instagram, any way you want to connect with us, we would love to do so. And Katie put in the chat our our website. And most likely when the recording is ready, it will be on YouTube and or our website. But thank you again, Dr. Heron and Jonathan, for all of your suggestions. And good luck and Godspeed, everyone, with
Yeah,
testing.
good luck. Good luck.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for being a part of this event.
Thank y'all.